One of my favorite genres of classic gaming is the shoot 'em up, and while there are plenty that are well known and talked about even to this day, one of my personal favorites is one that's not as well known, Abadox, the Deadly Inner War. But is Abadox a hidden gem for the NES, and should it be played today? Abadox was released in 1989 in Japan by Natsume. It would then make its way over to North America, released and published by Milton Bradley. Yep, that Milton Bradley that's known more for its board games. It would actually publish a handful of titles for the NES, including California games and even Marble Madness. The game is developed by ITL. They would go on to develop a great classic for the Sega Genesis known as Bonanza Brothers, and their last efforts were actually porting over Persona 1 and 2 to the PSP. The game takes place in the year 3012. This giant parasitic lifeform going through space is swallowing everything in its path, including your home planet of Abadox. You play as a member of the World Alive Force, which has launched a full-scale attack on this parasitic lifeform, and it's been pretty much swallowed up immediately. This includes even a hospital ship that Princess Maria of Abadox was actually on. Your character is the only surviving member of the World Alive Force, known as Second Lieutenant Nozzle, and it's your job now to launch into this lifeform and try to take it out. The game is a very interesting scrolling shoot 'em up that actually has two styles of play, vertical and horizontal levels that alternate from level to level. The game is very reminiscent of the Konami classic Lifeforce, which was released a few years prior to Abadox. One of the things that made me love the game so much was the fact you're traveling through this life form, going into the mouth to start off, and then going through its various body systems until eventually you make it to the core of what makes this thing tick and save the princess and try to escape. The game is broken up into 6 different levels and has plenty of power-ups to aid you in the adventure. While you start off with only a single shot blast that you're able to do from your gun, there is a variety of weapons you're able to get, as well as a few other upgrades, including speed boosts, which will make you go faster. You can level this up a couple of times, along with a lot of the other power-ups you're able to gain. You get these power-ups by defeating these little blue creatures that come by. Hitting them will drop one of these power-ups, and they're at the same spots each time you play, so you can kind of depend on which ones you're going to need at certain spots in the levels. The weapons you're able to get, though, include the Trace Beam, which is a 3-way shot. You have the Star Beam, which is a 5-way shot. The Paradora Gun, which is one of my favorites, which is basically a giant circle-like fire. And then there's also the Laser Gun, which, well, fires out a laser. Along with the speed boost, you're also able to get the barriers. You can have up to 4 of these barriers at a given time. They rotate around you and protect you from anything that's coming towards it, including not only the enemies, but the enemy fire as well. After you use them for a bit of time, though, they'll eventually turn blue before they're getting ready to go away. Though if you grab another barrier upgrade before they go away, you'll end up adding to the ones you currently have, up to 4, as well as replenish them back to their full health state. Similar to the barrier, you also get the Density Power Protector, which is basically a shield that you can have up to 3 of at a time. You'll glow different colors depending upon how many you have, and basically allows you to absorb a hit from enemies, as normally it is one-hit death, but with these, you can take multiple hits before you end up losing a life. There's also the missiles, which can be upgraded twice, starting off with you firing 2 missiles straight out, but once you upgrade it, the missiles become homing missiles that take out enemies that are on the sides and chase them down. Level number 1 starts off outside in space in a horizontal style. You're working your way towards this parasitic lifeform, eventually breaking into it and then heading through the mouth and starting your journey through its giant massive body. Midway through the level, and each level does contain both a mid-boss and a boss at the end of the level, you have this awesome skeleton dog-like creature that you get to fight. It's a little bit difficult to hit it because it's so low to the ground, and sometimes you may have to wait for it to jump in order to actually land shots in on it. But this is one of my favorite creatures in the game. It's also one of the first ones you see, and I love the art design for the most part throughout Abadox. Once you're past that battle, you're going inside the parasite, and even get to pass by its teeth and tongue, before eventually facing off with the boss at the end of the level, which is a weird face-like thing with giant little eyeballs that kind of pop out, yet you have to fire at. You'll notice a common theme that eyeballs are a big part of this life form, and you have to destroy a ton of them throughout the course of the game. Level number 2 is the first of the vertical style of levels, as you're traveling down the throat, which makes pretty good sense for the way that this level is positioned. As you're going through, you'll have to fight this weird worm-like mini-boss that goes around kind of in a circle where you have to attack certain parts of its body. As you continue on, you'll then have to fight another eyeball-like creature that's basically inside of a mouth, and there's these weird cannons that are set up, including one cannon in the lower corner that even looks like a face, where the cannon's actually a mouth that's sticking out of it. Like I said, I love the artwork that's included in the game. Stage 3 is back to the horizontal style, and now you're traveling through the deadly forest of blue nerves. Just kind of a cool name overall. You have this weird hammerhead-like shark creature that you have to battle at the midway point before eventually making it to the boss, which is once again another type of creature with a giant eyeball. It's actually like a whole body of a creature and has the eyeball kind of sticking out of its chest, which is its weak point. Now we're entering even farther into the creature, as stage 4 is another vertical level, this time going through the stomach. You have a weird crab-like guy that you're going to have to deal with for the mid-boss, and then you have these giant organs throughout the course of the rest of the level that have all these spikes jetting out of it. Heading down the left side, hopefully you end up going that way first, you'll eventually make it to the end of this organ, and it has a big part that's attached to it with an eyeball at the end, which is actually the weak point for the boss. I guess you're actually fighting the stomach itself. It's a little bit difficult to get to that eyeball if you start off on the right side, but firing enough firepower at that eye, you'll be moving on to stage 5. The last few levels of the game changed the design a little bit, going much more mechanical in the final couple of levels. Stage 5 is supposed to be the intestines, and there's a little bit of that in the design of the walls and ceiling throughout the course of it. Midway through, you'll have to fight these 3 robots that are kind of moving out of sync from one another, but thankfully only attacking one will eventually bring down this force, and you'll continue on to the level. The boss at the end is a gigantic robot, where you're actually firing at the head of the robot, and there's a lot of chaos and firepower going on before the robot's destroyed and you move on to level 6. Stage 6 is known as the Tube of Death, and it's very much that. Not only is this one of the toughest levels in the game, you have a ton of lasers that are going to try to stop you immediately. These lasers are turning on and off constantly, and you have to really kind of watch yourself getting in between them so you don't get blasted. You have a weird cabbage-like eyeball patch that you have to deal with for the mid-boss, and the final boss of the game is actually this very hard-to-describe creature that has 2 crystals on the left and right side. You have to destroy the crystal on the left while watching out for these weird arms that stick out of it, plenty of other firepower, and you can also see that the princess that you're trying to save is actually kind of encapsulated at the center bottom of this creature. If you're able to survive the battle and destroy the creature, you save the princess, but the game isn't quite over yet. To throw one last wrench into your journey, you have to escape the parasite. You have the princess with you, you're unable to fire, thankfully there's no enemies here, but you have to weave in and out with increasing speed and increasing walls getting in your way, a few changes of scenery along the way before eventually finally getting out of this and claiming victory. Like a lot of classic shoot-'em-ups, playing the game over and over again, you start to learn the patterns and are able to get farther and farther. While the game is still that one-hit death like a lot of classic shoot-'em-ups, there are tons of power-ups like the barrier, as well as the shield that will help you out. This is one of those shooters I was able to best multiple times even in my youth. What's cool also is, while you do have 3 lives, there is a continue system, and you have unlimited continues to start back at the beginning of what level you're on. You're always at that disadvantage when you do end up dying, as you lose all of your upgrades and power-ups, but the game does a decent enough job throwing more at you so you can power back up before you end up getting to some of the tougher encounters. While for some, Abadox may just be an average kind of shoot-'em-up and even a ripoff in some ways, like I mentioned earlier, being comparable to Lifeforce, the game does have a few flaws though as well, like slowdown at times. You know, that classic retro style when there's a lot of stuff going on screen and the game really starts to slow down, which can actually be helpful on a game like this because you'll be able to easily dodge in between fire or enemies, but then as soon as that speed picks back up, you may accidentally run into an enemy or fire because of that increase in speed. The one responsible for creating some of the grotesque imagery in the game was Hidenobu Takahashi, who would actually go on to be a major part of the Grandia series, directing the first and third games as well as being a character designer for the second one. He was also the original designer for Extreme, but I think was replaced as the game went farther into development. The sound and music department was partially handled by Kiyohiro Sada, who would also work on one of my other favorites, Bayou Billy, but also did the sound effects for Resident Evil Code Veronica, and a game that I feel is very underrated, especially when it comes to the music and sound department, is Summon Night Swordcraft Story for the GBA. Abadox is one of those classics that unfortunately never got a sequel or any sort of re-release. Thankfully, you can still get a copy of the game relatively cheap if you want to add it to your NES collection, at being only around $8 or $9 for a loose copy, and a complete copy going for less than $30. When it comes to being worth playing today, though, Abadox is one of those shooters that you may not have heard of, and if you're a big fan of the genre, you may appreciate what's going on here, especially maybe with the imagery, and some of the music included is also really well done. Abadox will always be a nostalgic personal favorite of mine, as I actually received it as one of my Christmas presents many years ago. But that guy is going to wrap up this retro review. I'd like to thank you for watching, and of course, I hope you enjoyed.